I love this CGI intro. Not only does it look even better than Kingdom Hearts 1's intro, but it also recaps Kingdom Hearts 1 and Chain of Memories in cinematic fashion. Granted, a lot of the important details are left out, but ain't nobody got time for that. Also, the music is amazing, but that's a no-brainer at this point. So how does KH2 hold up in terms of graphics? Honestly, pretty well. I'd say it looks better than KH1, though it is kind of a Pikmin 1 to Pikmin 2 situation, and it runs at a flawless 60 FPS all the way through. Not a single hiccup in sight as far as I can tell. Although the faces on the characters once again swap between animated and lifeless textures on a whim during cutscenes. At this point I've come to expect it from these games, but the contrast between the two still sticks out like a sore thumb. So, elephant in the room. The prologue of KH2 is rather infamous for being incredibly long. How long does it go on for, you ask?
For 3 hours.
3 hours? Are you kidding me with this guy?
I know that sounds insane, but what's even more insane is that they somehow made it work. In the 3-hour time span, you're doing so much stuff. You're earning money by doing jobs for people around town, like putting up posters, delivering mail on a skateboard, and killing bumblebees. You're participating in a struggle tournament, which, bland name aside, is incredibly fun. You're learning how the new combat system works when fighting nobodies, and the story is moving along at a steady pace. I was never bored, I was always engaged by the gameplay and the story, and what certainly helps is that Roxas is such a compelling character. Seeing him discover who he really is and his connection to Sora, only to be unfairly dealt a bad hand, made me care about him more than Sora ever did, if I can be honest. This prologue doesn't just get a win, it gets 3 wins for every hour spent on it. Speaking of combat, I should probably talk about that now. Typically a good sequel would take what was established before and refine it as much as it can. And KH2 does exactly that. Everything feels more fluid, the attacks are flashy and fun, and it makes the original game look slow as molasses in comparison. Of course it takes a bit for the combat to get going, but once it does, it never stops. Also, there are moments during combat where you can pull off special moves called reaction commands. And to put into perspective how awesome these things are, this is the first one you do. Yeah, we're in for some cool stuff with this game.
You just wait. Nobody, and I do mean nobody, messes with the Mighty Pete!
So, Mighty Pete, who lives in this tower anyway?
Oh, you don't know, eh? Well, it's old Yen Sid. Of course, he's probably a heartless by now.
Master Yen Sid lives here?
Yen Sid is the king's teacher.
Wow, sounds powerful.
Pete is an absolute joke of a villain, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
At times, if someone with a strong heart and will, be they evil or good, becomes a heartless, the empty shell they leave behind begins to act with a will of its own. An empty vessel whose heart has been stolen away. A spirit that goes on even as its body fades from existence. For you see, no bodies do not truly exist at all.
Then how are we fighting them? If nobodies don't exist, then they shouldn't have physical presence to begin with, but we can clearly see them moving about causing havoc. That must mean they exist, right? Naminé even said earlier to Roxas that he was never meant to exist, given that he's Sora's nobody. So why is Yen Sid trying to say that nobodies don't exist at all, when they clearly do in every sense of the word?
No, that will never do. Oh, now, dears. But don't you like this better?
Glad to see absolutely nothing has changed with the fairy since Sleeping Beauty. Didn't expect Fawn to get in on the action, but the gag is still funny nonetheless. At this point in the game, you start gaining spells to use in combat, and they've undergone some refinements. Blizzard, Thunder, and Cure all remain mostly the same. Fire is now a Ring of Flames rather than a Fireball, and Stop and Gravity were replaced by 2 new spells. Magnet, which draws nearby enemies into a single spot, and Reflect, which acts as an omnidirectional counter. Plus, when your MP runs out, it'll automatically charge back up instead of needing to use ethers to refill it. The puzzle aspect may be gone, but the improvements they made make the spells all the better. The gummy ship has also been reworked, and I'm not so sure I like it. Now it's more akin to Kid Icarus Uprising, so it should be even better since I love Kid Icarus Uprising. But I don't know, something about this one doesn't feel as great. I think it's mainly due to having to spam the fire button rather than hold it down for rapid fire, a lack of any memorable dialogue, and incredibly forgettable music. Granted, there are a few gummy ship routes that are kind of fun, but they're the exception rather than the rule.
See, Ping here was just on his way to join the Imperial Army. We gotta go find the other recruits over at the training camp.
Would you join us? It'll be easier to fit in if I'm with guys like you.
What do you mean, fit in?
Well, don't worry about that.
You're pretending to be a boy, aren't you?
Huh? You're a girl?
You didn't notice?
Not me.
Oh, come on. You cannot tell me that Goofy, of all people, was the only one to see through Mulan's disguise. The guy can't even tie his own shoes together without tripping over them 87 times first.
Man, first she uses me as a lighter, then she turns me into a cannonball. The head ancestor's gonna hear about this. You know, that's it. I give up. I can't take this no more. Come on, Mulan. Let's quit this charade and go home, girl.
Mushu.
What?
Mulan? A woman? It can't be.
So we went from Mulan's identity being revealed due to her being wounded and needing medical assistance in the original movie to Mulan's identity being revealed due to Mushu being stupid. Look, I get not wanting to copy the movie verbatim, but doing something different doesn't equal doing something good. Even then, it's not like this is all that significant of a change, since this world has just been a heavily watered-down version of the movie. Yeah, remember how I complimented KH1 for not doing the movies again with his worlds? Well, quite a few of KH2's worlds just give up and repeat the movies they're based on. And this is the first of them. Don't get me wrong, I like Mulan. The remake can go to hell, but the original movie is a great film. But I'd rather watch it on my own time than experience a shorter, less visually impressive, and less thematically rich version of it with Sora, Donald, and Goofy tacked on as well. Just like KH1, when you enter one of the Disney worlds, you could switch out either Donald or Goofy with the world's respective Disney character. And once again, they hold their own quite well. They're also able to use special limit moves to have the unique flair of said character and can deal a ton of damage in a pinch. So of course I took every opportunity I could to replace Donald because he still can't take a hit to save his life. Sometimes when you die during a boss fight, you'll get a brief second to play as Mickey and continue fighting until you can revive Sora to full health, or Mickey's health runs out and he just replenishes some of Sora's health. Even though it's brief, playing as Mickey is kinda fun. He's a bit floaty and doesn't have nearly the amount of moves Sora has, but he doesn't need to for the role he serves. Another thing KH2 adds to the combat is the drive forms. These forms give Sora a second Keyblade to use, as well as extra power to use in a pinch, at the expense of removing either Donald, Goofy, or Bo from the fight as long as it's in use. There are 5 in total to be unlocked throughout the game, and they all have their unique perks. We got Valor form, which focuses on power, Wisdom form, which focuses on magic, Limit form, which focuses on, well, limits, Master form, which is power and magic combined, and the Secret Final form, which is the best and my personal favorite. While I didn't really use Wisdom and Limit form all that much, all of them are well designed and fun to use in their own ways. The Shadow Stalker and Dark Thorn fight isn't particularly noteworthy, although it is kinda cool how it uses the ballroom to its advantage, but the reaction command for Dark Thorn is really cool to see in action. I mean, just watch.
What does he want here?
He must be with Organization 13. Ever heard of the Nobodies? When a strong-hearted person turns into a Heartless, a Nobody is created too.
So I guess we're just going to ignore the no meddling rule that was set up in the first game? Yeah, the rule was pretty flimsy in the first game, but the point is, there was a rule. Now that rule seems to have been completely thrown out the window with Sora blabbing about the nobodies to Beast. If you're gonna ignore a rule that was established and made apparent several times throughout the first game of the series, only 2 games later, why bother even making the rule at all? The summons return from KH1, and honestly, I used them even less in this game than I did in KH1. There's only 4 this time around, and they include Chicken Little, yes, the Chicken Little, Genie, Stitch, and Peter Pan. The reason I didn't use them a whole lot is because I didn't feel a need to given the usability of the drive forms. Whenever I tested them all out, I didn't feel like using them in combat, and it was only when I was doing the Underdrone tournaments, which we'll get to later, that I found them at all useful. Chicken Little throws baseballs and firecrackers, Genie can do different things depending on which drive form you choose, Stitch can stun all the enemies on screen for goodies, and Peter Pan can group them all together for decent damage. In the end, I'm still willing to give them a win since they helped out a lot when I needed them to, but I feel like these guys are becoming more relevant with each passing game.
By the by, what's down there?
Just the Underworld's deepest dungeon. This time I'm bringing out the mother of all bad guys.
Oh hey, they actually borrowed to animate Hades' face this time. Now I can actually appreciate James Wood's talents instead of being put off by the most bored expression you can make. The Cerberus fight isn't too memorable on its own, but the reaction command is pretty darn cool. Just look. Who the heck is cheering right now? We all saw that the stands were empty. Yeah, PS2 game and all, but surely you could add at least a few people to make it feel more like a real tournament.
Huh? Oh, you! Wait a sec. Roxas? Excuse me? Roxas? Oh, it's no use. Huh? What are you talking about? Let's see here. If the subject fails to respond, use aggression to liberate his true disposition. Right. Did they ever pick the wrong guy for this one?
Demix is fun. Not as fun as Axel, but at least he's not horribly one note like the rest. Well, golly gee, we got ourselves the Timeless River World, my personal favorite world of the lot. It's all in black and white, Sora and the gang got old cartoony designs for it, and the audio's even horribly compressed to match the time period. Only thing missing is that iconic Steamboat Willie whistle. Surprised I forgot that of all things in here. Also, to those of you waiting for me to make a joke about how Steamboat Willie is in the public domain now, I hate to disappoint y'all, but those jokes are too easy to make and haven't been funny since the end of January. I will say that the Hot Rod Heartless introduced here ain't the most pleasant to deal with. They pack a punch, especially when they drive into you, and they're fast. You'll need good timing to guard against their road rage if you don't want to end up being roadkill. Pete's fight in Timeless River is mostly the same as his fight in Olympus Coliseum, but there's also the gimmick of him taking elements from the various sections of the world. The flaming building, the vortex from Mickey's house, the towers from Lilliput, and the shaky construction zone. Makes the fight stand out a lot more despite Pete's continued failure to be a real threat. The battle music for Port Royal is the main theme of Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's a win by default. Obviously I can't play it for you guys, that's like staring down the barrel of a shotgun, but anyone who's heard the song can agree it's amazing. Unfortunately, that's my only compliment for Port Royal, because this ended up being my least favorite world in the game, for a number of reasons. The first of which being, the whole world is just Curse of the Black Pearl again. And I don't mean it's like Land of Dragons where they start the midpoint and loosely follow the movie's events. No, they literally hit every major plot beat they can from the movie, from the opening raid to the last fight with Barbossa. They even recreated the scene where Barbossa reveals the curse to Elizabeth word for word from the original script. I know people love Curse of the Black Pearl. I do too. But if I wanted to experience it again, I wouldn't play a condensed version that doesn't look nearly as good. I'd go on Disney Plus and watch it myself. For 2, when battling the pirates, they have this gimmick where they're only vulnerable when standing in the moonlight. On the one hand, I get what they're going for, showing the pirates for what they are, just like in the movie. But in practice, there are several points in the game where trying to manage several pirates coming at you at once in areas where there are good portions of shadows that make the pirates invincible becomes incredibly annoying, especially when playing on critical mode, which I did for the sake of an achievement. A lot of the time, it felt a lot less like me being bad at the game and a lot more like whether luck was on my side. Particularly in the section where you had to fight them on the boat. I died a lot on that section, let me tell ya. On top of that, they couldn't even get Johnny Depp to reprise his role as Captain Jack Sparrow. Granted, I don't think they got anybody to reprise their roles, but Sparrow is the most unfortunate because Johnny Depp is Jack Sparrow. As much of an A-list actor as he is, everyone and their grandma will agree that you can't replace Johnny Depp. And Disney's gonna find that out real soon when their Born to Die reboot is unveiled. It doesn't even have the courtesy to end well with a good boss fight against Barbossa. The Illuminator covering the arena in darkness isn't the problem. That thing goes down in like 2 seconds. The problem is that Barbossa hits like Mike Tyson and is equally quick. If you haven't mastered guarding or reflecting attacks by this point, you're gonna learn right now. Plus, if Jack dies at any point in the fight, you automatically lose. That's just great. I love needing to micromanage my AI partners that I only have mild control over.
I'm home! Ow! It's been eons!
Homer Simpson's still cosplaying as Genie, I see. And look, as much as I appreciate you guys enlightening me on why Robin Williams didn't reprise his role in KH1, it still sucks that he didn't, regardless of reason. I will say Dan Castellaneta does do a better job here than he did previously, but he'll never replace Robin Williams. Search your feelings, you know it to be true. We're in Halloween Town, and they remixed This Is Halloween again. You know the drill by now. And if you don't because you're new, welcome, and check out the other KH heroes for context.
Here it is, the door to Christmas Town. The spooks of Halloween can get so tiresome year after year. I wanted something new, and I found this.
So I guess the lesson Jack learned in the first movie about accepting the role you're gifted with meant nothing? Look, I appreciate that this world doesn't try to do The Nightmare Before Christmas again, but that doesn't mean the better option is breaking established canon. And you may be wondering, but doesn't Kingdom Hearts exist in its own bubble separate from the original movie? Well, that's what I thought given the events of the first game, but in this game, both Santa and Jack reference what happened in The Nightmare Before Christmas, meaning in this continuity, the original movie had to have happened at least in some capacity. Sure, things can change over a certain amount of time, but it's never specified how long it's been since the events of the movie, so that excuse doesn't really fly. I don't have much to say about the Pride Lands, except for the fact that it's just the second half of The Lion King. Seriously, it starts with Mufasa's death and then just goes from there, beat for beat, and in some cases word for word. Did original stories just die with this game? Because this is the third Disney World that just throws its hand in the air and gives up on telling a unique story. The Lion King may be a great movie, but once again, I don't want to play a surgically removed piece of it that's not as thematically rich or visually impressive. I want to experience the whole thing on my own time when I want to. Oh wait, there is one other thing I could say about the Pride Lands. The Living Bone Heartless introduced here are mean. They love to spam their spin attacks and shred your health, and oftentimes you won't have the chance to get out of the way. You can't guard in line for them either, so pray that luck's on your side with these guys. I also don't have much to say about space paranoids at the moment, mainly because I never watched Tron and thus lack any real knowledge of it, but the light cycle minigame is a real pain in the neck. It goes on for quite a bit, and even the slightest mistake can take a big chunk of your health away. It did get better when I had to replay it several levels later, but when you play it for the first time, it's infuriating. Oh no, it's the Demix fight! One of the 5 fights KH2 fans can't shut up about, and this one is for negative reasons. It's so unbelievably hard that I beat him on my first try. I'm not joking, guys. I played this game on Critical, the hardest difficulty, and I beat Demix on my first try. Even when I had to refight him due to IRL stuff, I barely struggled against him. Gotta say, this is one of the most overblown fights I've seen in a fandom. In fact, I'd say this fight is kind of enjoyable, to the point where I'm willing to give him a win because of it. Sorry, KH2 fans who are eager to see me tear him asunder.
Look out! Wow!
Goofy! No!
Hey, you're the king's captain. You gotta get up.
Come on, wake up!
I'm sorry about the ice cream.
Goofy?
Goofy.
This is not happening. It can't be happening. It can't.
Later. Hey, fellas!
Wow, okay, you're really just gonna fake us out like that, huh? Obviously, I know they wouldn't kill off Goofy at this point in the story, but at least had the nerve to wait until after the big fight to reveal he was okay. This is security breach ruin levels of fake emotional moments. The Battle of 1000 Heartless. This was the moment KH2 clicked for me. Beforehand, I was enjoying myself well enough despite some apparent issues, but at this moment, I knew for sure that I liked this game. As the name suggests, you are literally fighting 1000 Heartless at once, and you feel like a grade A badass while doing it. Cutting them down like a hot knife through butter, and even using some as lasers like Homelander, it's just sheer adrenaline that never gets old. Storm Rider is a boss that isn't particularly tough, but it has a cool sense of skill, you using tornadoes to blast yourself into the air and onto its back to deal damage, and at some points, slide under it to kick it into the air. I'm a sucker for cool action sequences, sue me. Crimson Jazz Heartless are the absolute worst because they fight like they hate you. They hit like a truck and will surround you with deadly explosions that are extremely difficult to get away from, especially since they're more often than not accompanied by other Heartless, or worse, other Crimson Jazzes. Anytime they show up, I was very tempted to just run past them, but because of the achievement for reaching level 99, I ultimately chose to take them out, save for like 2 moments. Zoldan's fight was one that initially confused me quite a bit, but I slowly came to appreciate it more and more as I fought him. He's got a shield made of wind, with the only way to break it being to use jump commands, and his attack patterns are fast and initially hard to read. With enough practice, I was able to get used to him and beat him, but I wouldn't say he's the greatest thing ever or anything. Also, as a side note, on one of my attempts, I got insanely lucky with Mickey spawning in to help me after death over 5 times in a row. I don't know what happened, but I'm glad it did. I'm not sure if this is just a me thing or others feel the same, but I found the Grim Reaper fight to be really annoying. It centers around the gimmick of getting all 882 medallions into the chest in the center in order to make the boss vulnerable, and the only way to get it to drop the medallions is with magic. So if you don't have any ethers or elixirs on you and you run out of magic, that means waiting around for your MP to recharge and hoping the boss doesn't wipe the floor with you, which it can do very easily. You could always rely on Dom to get the job done, but that's a wish made in vain since he has all the structural integrity of a sandcastle in a tsunami. It's far from the worst fight in the game, but that doesn't mean it's good either. Genie Jafar is back for a third bout, and he still can't get a good fight. Is this one at least better than the others? Yes, but we're comparing a dirty tin can to a damaged tin can here. Jafar does actually put his phenomenal cosmic powers to use here, but in all the worst ways. It starts off fine with him chucking towers at you, spinning around as if that's supposed to do anything, and using lightning around his head, and beating him is as simple as taking out the hands to disable his magic for a bit, go for the stomach to stun him, smack his head a bit before using the reaction command to spin him around, and hit him some more before the cycle repeats. Everything after that, however, is where things get bad. The energy balls he spams can quickly erase your health if you don't spam reflect. The tornado section isn't too bad if you move around constantly, but can be devastating if you mess up. And jeez Louise, that final phase where he throws everything he has at you all at once is a nightmare. If you've managed to survive everything else, this part will end your run more often than not unless you've got fate on your side. The Ground Shaker fight was more spectacle than substance, but that doesn't make it not fun. Running between its feet while jumping and pushing back its attacks, and even just jumping high onto its back is just exhilarating. Again, its attacks aren't anything special, but the cinematic flair of it all makes it worth a win in my book. I haven't talked about Atlantica yet, and that's because you need to visit it several times at different points in the story to progress in it. Atlantica is apparently infamous amongst KH2 fans from what I know, and I can see why. It's not really a world in the traditional sense, rather it's a collection of rhythm minigames for some odd reason. The actual gameplay of them is tolerable enough, I suppose, even though the button prompts are more in sync with the lyrics rather than the song itself, and most of the songs are fine. Part of Your World Will Never Not Be Beautiful, Under the Sea is a jam with Haley Joel Osment having some surprisingly nice pipes, Ursula gets an okay original song that's nowhere near as good as Poor Unfortunate Souls, but it's nice to hear Pat Carroll sing again. The other two original songs stick out like sore thumbs, though. Swim This Way is infamous for being really bad, with absolutely no melody whatsoever, and the last song is somewhat better, but is ruined by Donald being incapable of singing properly. Of course, I'm not brave enough to play any of these for you, but think of that as a blessing in disguise, since it means your ears will be spared from some bad music. And to rub salt in the wound, the events of this world are exactly the same as the movie. Again! I'm sorry to all of you who are tired of hearing me say this, but regardless of whether or not I like the original movie, I don't want to experience a heavily watered down, bad rhythm game version of it. I'd much rather watch it myself, which I did when the remake came out purely to spite Disney. Oh, come on, it's right there. Just stick your hand in the rocks and pull it out. You don't need a more powerful version of a spell that, I feel bears mentioning, will use to lift the boulder off a statue.
Warning. User control is terminated indefinitely.
No good.
Leon, let me try.
This is your final warning. Stop at once.
Bon appetit.
Really, Leon? You couldn't put the disc in yourself before meddling with the keyboard? Why did Aerith have to be the one to do it? The fight against the MCP is one of those fights that's fairly tough, but enjoyable nonetheless. Phase 1 with Commander Sark is borderline pathetic with how easy he goes down, but Phase 2 is where they up the ante. Sark, despite being bigger and having more abilities, isn't too tough to take down. The real goal is to destroy some of the MCP's shields to create an opening to slowly delete it over time. Halfway through, it'll add in lasers that are initially annoying, but are totally manageable. Also, I didn't experience this in my playthrough, but apparently the MCP can create walls that can be used to one-shot Sark in pretty cool fashion. Wish I could have done that myself, but the more you know. The 100 Acre Wood is exactly like its KH1 counterpart in the sense that it's a minigame collection that's slowly unlocked the more pages you find. And it's just as fun and chill as KH1's variants. You're floating around on a balloon, smashing stuff, you're riding on a honeybot through the woods, and even on the pages of the book you're in, and you're going on an expedition with the whole gang. It's just good vibes all around. Though if I had to complain about anything, I do take issue with Kanga's voice.
Eeyore told me Pooh wasn't quite himself. I thought this might be just what the poor dear needed.
That's not Kanga, that's Merryweather in disguise. It may be small, but it did take me out of it for a bit. I don't know why, but the option of liver pepper ice cream when trying to guess the password for the computer had me cackling the first time I saw it. Whether my sense of humor is broken or others agree with me, that's getting a win.
Let's go. You're fading away.
Well, that's what happens when you put your whole being into an attack. You know what I mean? Not that nobodies actually have beings, right? Anyway, I digress. Go. Find Kyrie. Oh, almost forgot. Sorry for what I did to her.
When we find her, you can tell her that yourself.
Think I'll pass. My heart just wouldn't be in it, you know? Haven't got one.
Axel, what were you trying to do?
I wanted to see Roxas. He was the only one I liked. He made me feel like I had a heart. It's kind of funny. You make me feel the same. Kyrie's in the castle dungeon. Now go!
Axel.
Even though we don't spend much time here, I really like the city and the world that never was. It looks beautiful and seems like a place that should be bustling and full of life, yet is eerily devoid of any real life. Fittingly like the nobodies that call this place home. Everyone has their own story for Roxas's fight, and I have one of my own. When I fought him for the first time, I was destroyed almost instantly, and kept getting destroyed in a lot of my attempts, to the point where I thought I was going to have the hot take of Roxas's fight is not very good. But then, after a couple levels of grinding and learning the attack patterns, I saw this fight for what it really was. A work of art. Every attack is perfectly manageable, and it's all on you to adapt and counteract against it. The music is absolutely beautiful, conveying the tragedy of Roxas as a character through no bombastic orchestra, but a somber melody that's tear-jerking in all the best ways. In fact, you know what it reminds me of? Another's Requiem from Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, which is fitting since it's the same composer. This fight doesn't just get a win, it gets 5 wins straight from the heart. Xigbar's fight is probably the easiest organization fight, and as a result, it's kinda fun. He mainly shoots lasers a bunch, which are perfectly manageable, and he can also change up the shape of the arena, which is neat. Also, some lasers he shoots can be kicked back in his face, and that's just fun to do. When I entered the Proof of Existence area, there was something about it that grappled me. It's basically a graveyard for the organization members, and it's the only way they can really make their mark on the world as they are. It's also worth noting that Roxas's grave is always lit blue to signify that as long as Sora lives, he'll be alive too, and that Xemnas doesn't have one himself. Could that be because he believes himself immortal and will never die? Or is it perhaps something else entirely? A little food for thought. Luxord's fight isn't really a fight in the traditional sense. Rather, you gotta indulge in his gaze to make his time go down until it runs out. I know how to deal with him by this point, but getting there was awkward. For starters, he turns you into a dice block and immediately hits you the second the fight starts, so that's not cheap at all. For two, he'll make you pick a circle out of X's on the attack menu in a short amount of time, and he'll occasionally turn to a card and hide among several others, forcing you to find his card and flip it to get him out. These aren't bad with practice, but when his time gets low, he busts out his desperation move, which took me a while to deal with, given how rapidly he attacks and how devastating the blows can be if you screw up. In hindsight, I could probably handle him much better, but trying to understand everything he can do when it's so different from every other fight in the game is a daunting task, especially for a newbie like myself.
Maybe I didn't need to fight him after all. I think he left the organization because he really wanted to meet you.
Roxas. I wish I could meet him too.
I was really confused when Sora said this because he did meet Roxas. He literally fought him a while ago. But then I found out that the Roxas fight was not in the original release of KH2. It was actually added into KH2 Final Mix along with several other fights, which is the version I play for this video. Yet despite this change, they didn't bother to fix this dialogue? Maybe you could argue that Sora didn't recognize Roxas when he fought him, but Sora knows what Roxas looks like since he's seen a photo of him. Maybe it could still work if Roxas kept his hood up the entire time, but as is, this feels like an oversight.
Ansem, I'm ashamed!
All the more proof that hearts cannot be contained by data. Run, my friend. It's going to self-destruct, and anything could happen.
But, Your Majesty!
Sora, the rest is up to you. And Roxas, I doubt you can hear me, but I am sorry.
Ansem!
My heart is telling me what I must do. Please allow me to do what it says.
No! Riku!
His heart's decided. We can't change that.
I know this is supposed to be some dramatic sacrifice, but I'm sorry, I can't really feel anything for Ansem. His alias Diz never really gelled with me in Chain of Memories, and neither did he here. The Ansem reports did shine some light on who he was as a person, but I was never truly invested in him. He was just a scientist with a rogue apprentice, and that was never enough for me to really care about him. Admittedly, this is a small thing, but it's so noticeable to me. Why does Riku run like he's been shot in the hip? It's so goofy, and the moment I noticed it, I couldn't unnotice it. Xemnas' first fight is really cool. I mean, it opens with you running off a building to clash with him. You know the fight is good when that's how you start. The rest of the fight has Xemnas behave very much like the unknown from KH1, who, in retrospect, was actually Xemnas the whole time. And he's totally fair and challenging. Took me a couple tries, but I had fun doing so. Now it's time for the final boss. Woo! Boy, is this fight something special. If you thought running up a building to face someone was cool, try jumping and slicing apart buildings just to get to the boss. Seriously, if you don't think that's cool, you're not alive. After that, you gotta smack enemies into the engines to blow them up and leap to the other engine to avoid being roasted. Simple, but effective. Then you gotta take out the energy core while also dealing with a bunch of nobodies. A bit tricky, but doable. Then you make it to Xemnas, who's apparently just been chilling on his throne the entire time, and he fights you with his sword, shield, and even some of the other organization members' abilities while sitting on his throne. How many fights can you point to that have done that? It seems like it's over after that with a lengthy cutscene that provides a bit of closure for Roxas and Naminé, but then Xemnas comes back for even more. This phase plays like the Gummy Ship missions, only actually challenging and fun. Then the next phase has you fight Xemnas again, who is still on his throne, and ditches the organization members' abilities for being able to smack you into the distance so he can shoot lasers and throw buildings at you. Said buildings can also be thrown back at him. And I'm sorry, this just makes me giddy like a kid in the candy store. But then there's the final phase with Xemnas. I hate this phase for two simple reasons. One is that he pulls a Sans Undertale and opens with his strongest attack that mandates you either constantly use reversal or reflect the second the fight starts, because if you don't, you're as good as dead. The amount of times I died in this one section of the fight is agonizing. And the amount of times I had to hear Xemnas say, "Anger and hate are supreme," made it even worse. Anyways, the rest of the fight isn't that abhorrent until you get him to low health and he busts out the 1000 lasers. Yes, it's an iconic part of Kingdom Hearts history, and it looks amazing when you're not the one playing, but you gotta mash both the Y button and the A button to make Sora and Riku block them all for a solid 30 seconds, which doesn't sound that long, I know, but when you're the one constantly mashing, it feels so much longer. I could live with this bit if it was just one button, but adding another one on top of that is just cruel. Gee, why does that sound familiar? This is the first boss fight I've talked about in an era that I'm willing to give both a win and a sin to. A win for most of the fight being awesome, but a sin for that last phase. KH2 fans are probably gonna riot over me saying all that, but it's my video and my rules.
We're back.
You're home.
Well, with that done, it's time for post-game cleanup, and to be honest, most of it ain't that bad. The collectible chests and puzzle pieces were a cinch to get, and even the synthesis quest that was so loathsome in KH1 was surprisingly nowhere near as bad. There's just one thing about it that kinda peeves me. See, what I didn't tell you about the drive forms is that each one has special abilities tied to them, such as high jump, dodge roll, and glide. And you can use these abilities outside of the forms by leveling up said forms. I didn't know any of this for the longest time because apparently I overlooked the one moment the game tells you about this and went the whole game without any of the abilities. I just don't understand why this change was made. In the previous games, those abilities were unlocked as you leveled up and progressed through the game. But here, while leveling up the forms is easy enough, it feels like innovation for the sake of innovation rather than making a well-informed decision that enhances the game. Even then, there's one extra caveat to the drive forms I haven't mentioned yet, and that's Anti-Form. This is a form that activates when you spam drive forms a bunch that aren't final form, and it's the weakest form of them all, doing the least damage and having no abilities. Worst of all, you have very little control over when it activates, meaning you could be minding your business trying to level up the drive forms, but then get hit with this activating instead, ruining your grinding. It helped when getting the achievement for activating it 13 times, but it's an annoying hindrance everywhere else. There's a special side quest that involves tracking down each member of Mushroom 13, just roll with it, and completing each one of their little mini-games. They all got a variety of things to do, like beating them within a few seconds, taking out a bunch of them without getting hit, and making them spin with enough hits. While some of them can be a little aggravating, I'm looking at you, Mushroom Mates, I actually enjoy partaking in their mini-games. At first I thought they were impossible, but after looking at a helpful guide, they were all reasonably challenging. Apparently some KH fans don't think so, but I'll give them a win regardless. There's also a side quest involving the absent silhouettes, which are special rematches against the 5 organization members that died in Chain of Memories: Zexion, Larxene, Lexius, Vexen, and Marluxia. These can be pretty hard fights depending on what level you choose to fight them at, but I got enjoyment from most if not all of them. Zexion was the only one that bugged me because of his illusion gimmicks, and especially the musical chairs part that basically guaranteed death if you failed. Larxene can be annoying given how fast she is, but can be dealt with relatively easily with practice. Lexius had a gimmick of increasing his power every phase, which was a little confusing, but nothing outrageous. Vexen was pretty easy to beat, even with his data replica of Sora on my tail, and getting stronger the more data he scanned to me, and Marluxia was surprisingly my favorite of the bunch since his telegraphed attacks made him fun to fight, despite the doom clock on my head that would kill me after enough hits. Sometimes the instant death pools would get me, but for the most part, he's cool. All in all, the absent silhouettes are a fun challenge. Just wait until after you beat the game to fight them. You'll thank me later. So the Gummy Ship has achievements for getting an S rank on 1 normal and 1 EX mission on every route, and an achievement for collecting all the blueprints, which are done by getting S ranks on specific missions. To be honest, 95% of these missions are pretty easy if you make a donut ship like the one on screen, since most enemies target the center of your ship, and a donut ship has no sensor. There is one exception to this, and that's Assault of the Dreadnought's 3rd mission. Most of it is perfectly fine with the right weapons, but it turns into a frustrating test of endurance right at the end when a Hunter X ship shows up. I don't think I even need to explain why this part specifically is so ridiculous. You guys can clearly see this game go from Kid Icarus to Toho in real time. Just like KH1, Olympus Coliseum has a number of tournaments you need to compete in for achievements, all of which have score requirements for another achievement. While some of these did give me trouble at first, a couple of guys made the score requirements as well as the tournaments themselves a cinch, with the exception of the Hades Paradox Cup. It's a 50-round long endurance test, and it's so much harder than in KH1. I will say, rounds 1 through 30 aren't bad if you know what you're doing, and rounds 31 through 40 can be a pain, but still aren't too bad. But those last 10 rounds can be the difference between victory and catastrophic failure. You're stripped of Doll and a Goofy, meaning the only drive form you can use is Limit Form, a form I barely used, and you're pitted against some of the most evil combinations of Heartless and Nobodies ever conceived. Couple that with a rematch against Cerberus and a 4-on-1 against Cloud, Tifa, Yuffie, and Leon towards the end, and it's a grueling undertaking, all the more exasperated by the score requirement of 15,000 points by the end of the tournament. Weirdly, the last bout against Hades is a cakewalk, but the journey getting there will test a man's patience for sure. You know what else will test a man's patience? The data battles. All 13 members of Organization 13 are here, and they're so much stronger than before, to the point where not many of them can really be considered good anymore. I'm not going to go over all of them since they're largely the same as their previous fights, just with slight differences, but I am going to highlight a few of them so you get the gist. Roxas's laser attacks can't be blocked, even though I swear you could block them before. Larxene has a tendency to stun lock you with certain attacks. Demyx has a lot more rounds of dealing with its water illusions that require careful use of the Wisdom Form to conquer. Axel's Lava Floor now eats away at your health very quickly, might I add. Luxord's Desperation move can swap yours and his time if you fail, which is really easy to do. And Xemnas? Well, imagine this super cool first fight that's only a little bit harder, now coupled with the obnoxious last phase of the final boss with no checkpoints. Bear in mind, this is coming from someone who fought and beat all of these guys at level 99 with all the drive forms and summons maxed out and the Ultima weapon equipped. I am literally as well equipped as I can be for these fights, and they're still not good. Some of them are doable, I guess, but more often than not, it felt like I was bashing my head against a wall, expecting the wall to crumble when it was never going to. But after that, we get an actually good secret boss with Sephiroth. Yep, the one-winged angel is back and ready for more. This guy is fast, hits hard, and won't provide much room for error, but I shockingly found him to be significantly easier than all of the data battles. He definitely killed me a bunch of times, but it also felt like I was learning every time I died. Sure, the attack where he empties all my health and MP could be a pain, but it's easily telegraphed and can be interrupted. Even if I couldn't, an elixir or two would take care of it just fine. Overall, Sephiroth is worthy of being called one of the best KH fights in my book. With all that said and done, there's only one thing left to do to complete Kingdom Hearts 2. Defeat Lingering Will. One of the most infamous fights in Kingdom Hearts history, and for good reason. He does not hold back even a little bit, with several attacks that pack a punch, spells that can prevent you from casting magic, swinging your Keyblade, or attacking altogether until you break them, and a desperation move that requires either the best luck in the world or a very specific strategy to avoid. Yeah, I hear you say, lingering will is incredibly hard. Everyone knows this. But that's what makes the fight fun, right? Right?
No.
I'm sorry, guys. I tried. I really tried, but I just can't get into this fight. I adore the music and did enjoy the fight on the first several attempts, but there's only so many times that guy can be beaten over the head by the same boss before appreciation turns into frustration, and frustration turns into controller breaking rage. Even after looking at a guide on how to beat this guy, it still took me several attempts before I finally won. And I can't say that by that point, I had any enjoyment for the fight left in me. I'm saying all this out of disappointment, by the way. I wanted to like this boss, but I just can't. I'm sorry. So that's Kingdom Hearts 2. Looking at the counters, you're probably thinking that I like the game overall, but have some serious problems with it that prevent me from calling it truly great. However, that's not exactly true. I definitely have my issues with it, make no mistake, but they don't really impact my overall enjoyment as much as you'd think. For me, this is one of those games where you have very apparent issues with many parts of it, but you still find yourself saying you liked the game after all was said and done. I may have gone on a few tangents here and there, but by the end of the story, I left with a smile on my face, which is a lot more than I could say for both KH1 and especially Chain of Memories. I wouldn't say this game made me a fan, nor would I say that it's especially exceptional, but it is really good, to the point where if I found myself wanting to, I would gladly replay it on my own time. Casually speaking, of course. No way in hell am I doing another completionist run, but that's neither here nor there. Next up on the list of games to cover in ERA form is 358 Days Over 2, which is considered by many to be the worst in the franchise. That'll be some interesting juxtaposition, going from the fan favorite to the black sheep, but that'll be after a different video talking about Death Battle again. I was already planning on doing 2 videos on the show, but since the first one unexpectedly blew up by the channel's standards, really appreciate that by the way, I'm even more excited to make that one. What'll it be about? Well, let's just say we're going in the opposite direction of the last video. See you next time, everybody.